They called him a lunatic. The airfield was cratered. Smoke rose in dark plumes. Every takeoff felt like a death sentence, and he proposed that the aircraft should roll backward first. His commanding officer stared silently. The engineers shook their heads in disbelief. But the calculations, he insisted, were correct. The question was not whether it would succeed, the question was whether anyone would allow him to prove it. Summer 1943. The Royal Air Force Station at Manston, Kent, just across the channel from occupied France, close enough to hear the distant thrum of enemy bombers on clear nights, close enough that German fighters could reach the coast within minutes. Manston was not a fortified bastion. It was an emergency strip, a last refuge. Pilots called it the aircraft carrier on land. Planes landed there when they were too damaged, too low on fuel, or too desperate to reach anywhere else. The runway was short, the margin for error non-existent. Lately, the Luftwaffe had learned its location. The airfield sat flat against chalk cliffs. Wind rolled in from the North Sea, cold and relentless. Ground crews labored in layers of wool and grease-stained overalls, their breath fogging in the morning light. Hurricanes and Spitfires dotted the grass, some intact, others stripped for parts. Repair crews worked through the night. Welders threw sparks under canvas tarps. Fuel trucks idled beside revetments. Everything smelled of petrol, burnt oil, and damp earth. There was a rhythm to it. Engines coughed to life at dawn. Pilots climbed into cramped cockpits. Ground crews waved them forward. Tires bounced over uneven turf. And then came the roar, the acceleration, the instant when metal defied gravity. But the rhythm was breaking. German bombers had begun targeting Manston directly, not with precision, but with volume. They carpeted the field with high explosive and incendiary clusters. Craters pocked the runway like lunar scars. Some were 10 feet deep, others filled with rainwater overnight and froze. Repair crews shoveled gravel and laid metal matting, but the damage accumulated faster than the fixes. Takeoffs became obstacle courses. Pilots swerved around debris, gauging distance and speed with no margin for hesitation. Some made it, some did not. Wreckage piled along the perimeter. Twisted aluminum, shattered propellers, names crossed off the duty roster. And then there were planes that survived the bombing but could not leave aircraft too damaged to fly, awaiting parts that would not arrive for days. Planes that had landed with a destroyed wheel, sitting lopsided on the grass, awaiting a mechanic's miracle. The problem was not only the craters, it was time. The longer a plane remained on the ground, the more likely it would be destroyed in the next raid. The Luftwaffe returned like clockwork, dawn, dusk, sometimes midday when clouds hung low. Air raid sirens wailed. Ground crews sprinted for shelters. Pilots still in cockpits braced for impact. Bombs screamed down. The earth trembled. And when the dust settled, fewer planes remained than before. Wing Commander Hugh Verity walked the perimeter at dusk. Stocky and methodical, with a calm forged by too many near misses, he surveyed the craters, bent landing gear, scorch marks on the tarmac. He knew the numbers. Manston was losing more aircraft on the ground than in the air. That was unacceptable. But what could be done? Concrete runways took weeks to repair. Fighter coverage was stretched thin. Reinforcements were not coming. The station operated on improvisation and stubbornness. And now, as Verity stood in the fading light, one of his junior officers approached. Flight Lieutenant Peter Townsend, young, sharp, carrying a notebook full of diagrams that made little immediate sense, had been observing takeoffs, timing them, measuring distances, calculating vectors. He had noticed something. The riskiest phase of takeoff was the roll, the moment when the plane moved fast but was not yet airborne, exposed and committed. If a bomb fell during that window, there was no escape. The pilot could not stop, could not swerve, could not lift off early without stalling. The question: what if the plane could start its roll from a different position? What if, instead of beginning at the far end of the runway, it started closer to the operational strip, but facing the wrong way? What if it rolled backward first, pivoted, and then launched forward in a shorter, faster burst? Verity listened without interrupting. Townsend explained that a rearward roll, assisted by gravity or a slight decline, could place the aircraft in a pre-compressed state, engine already roaring, control surfaces set, pilot aligned. When the plane pivoted and began the forward roll, it would accelerate faster. The takeoff distance would shrink. Exposure time would decrease. The calculations, Townsend insisted, confirmed it. Verity nodded slowly and instructed Townsend to write it up formally, because if the idea was flawed, it would kill someone, and if correct, it might save dozens. Peter Townsend had not intended to reinvent aviation doctrine. He grew up in Rangoon, the son of a colonial civil servant, humid air, monsoon rains, the hum of ceiling fans in whitewashed rooms. Quiet and curious, he preferred studying how things worked to social rituals. He dismantled clocks, sketched mechanical systems, and read engineering manuals for pleasure. When his family returned to England, he attended Haileybury, a boarding school known for producing officers and administrators. He was neither rebellious nor conformist, he was observant, watching, measuring, and testing assumptions. When he joined the Royal Air Force in 1933, it was not out of romantic notions of aerial chivalry. Flying was a problem worth solving. By 1940, Townsend was a fighter pilot, flying Hurricanes during the Battle of Britain, engaging enemy aircraft over the Thames estuary. He learned to calculate deflection angles mentally while pulling 6GS, realizing survival depended not on courage, but on geometry, knowing when to turn, when to dive, when to disengage. Skilled, precise, not flashy or reckless, he shot down several enemy aircraft and was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. What impressed his peers most was not his kill count, but his habit of returning from missions with meticulous observations, wind patterns, engine performance at altitude, how sunlight refracted through canopy glass and obscured vision at certain angles. He treated every flight as a field study. In 1943, Townsend was assigned to Manston. It was not glamorous. It was a repair depot, a refuge, a place where damaged aircraft limped home to die or be reborn. He did not complain. He watched. He saw the bottleneck, the craters, the delayed launches, the pilots who waited too long and paid for it. He saw the ground crews working themselves to exhaustion, filling holes that would be blown open again the next day. And he saw the fear, not panic, just the quiet, corrosive knowledge that luck was finite, that every takeoff could be the last, and that no one seemed to have a plan beyond endurance. So he began sketching, not artistically, functionally. He drew the runway from above. He marked crater positions. He calculated taxi distances. He noted wind direction, surface friction, and the turning radius of a Spitfire at low speed. He timed takeoffs with a stopwatch. He measured the seconds between engine start and wheels up. He found that the average takeoff roll consumed between 12 and 15 seconds. In those seconds, the plane was a sitting target. If the roll could be shortened by even 3 seconds, the probability of survival during a raid increased significantly. But how? He considered assisted launches, catapults like those on aircraft carriers. But Manston had no such infrastructure. He considered prepositioning aircraft on slopes using gravity to aid acceleration, but the field was flat. He considered lighter fuel loads, but that would limit combat range. And then he thought about direction. Every takeoff began the same way. The plane faced forward. The pilot advanced the throttle. The plane rolled forward. But what if it did not have to start that way? What if the plane could begin in a state of potential energy already aligned, already calibrated, and then released in a shorter, more explosive burst? The idea seemed absurd. Aircraft do not roll backward. They are not designed for it. The tail wheel, the propeller wash, the torque, all of it assumes forward motion. But Townsend was not interested in what was conventional. He was interested in what was possible. He ran the numbers. A rearward taxi of 20 yards followed by a pivot and immediate forward acceleration could reduce the total takeoff distance by nearly a third. It would require precision. It would require practice, but it was feasible theoretically. He took his diagrams to Verity. He explained the concept. He anticipated skepticism. What he got was cautious interest. Verity told him to test it quietly, unofficially, and if it worked, they would talk again. The problem Manston faced was not unique, but it was acute. Across Britain, airfields dealt with bomb damage. Across Europe, runways were cratered, patched, and cratered again. But most stations had length. They had multiple runways, taxiways, and dispersal areas. Manston had one strip and it was short. Originally designed as an emergency landing site, it was never meant to handle sustained operations. Yet by 1943, it was doing exactly that. Damaged bombers diverted there. Fighters refueled there. Reconnaissance planes launched from there under cover of darkness. The tempo was relentless. And the Luftwaffe knew it. German intelligence had identified Manston as a high-value nuisance. It was close to the coast. It supported channel patrols. It facilitated rescue operations. Destroying it would create a gap in British defensive coverage, so the attacks intensified. Dornier bombers came in low, releasing their payloads in tight clusters. The bombs were not precision-guided. They did not need to be. The goal was not to hit a specific hangar. It was to render the runway unusable. And it worked. Craters appeared faster than they could be filled. Engineers laid steel matting over the holes, but the matting buckled under the weight of landing aircraft. Planes skidded. Landing gear collapsed. Pilots aborted landings and diverted to other fields, burning fuel they could not spare. Station commanders pleaded for concrete, for more engineers, for heavier air cover, but resources were finite. The war was everywhere. Manston was a single point on a vast map of contested ground. It would have to make do, and so the personnel adapted. Ground crews became experts in field repair. They welded by moonlight. They scavenged parts from wrecks. They learned to patch a fuel line with insulation tape and prayer. Pilots learned to land on half a runway. They learned to judge distance by eye, to feel the stall in their bones, to trust their instincts over their instruments. It was impressive, but it was not sustainable. The real danger was not the bombs themselves. It was the window of vulnerability they created. A plane on the ground during a raid had three options: take off immediately, seek cover, or burn. Takeoff was preferable, but it required time. Time to start the engine, time to taxi into position, time to accelerate down a cratered strip, while the sky above filled with flak and falling metal. Many pilots tried. Some made it. Others were caught mid-roll, unable to lift off, unable to stop, dying in the worst possible way, committed to motion, but denied escape. Verity knew the statistics. He reviewed the after-action reports. He read the casualty lists, and he understood that morale was eroding, not visibly. The crews were professional. They did their jobs, but there was a heaviness in the air, a fatigue that sleep did not cure. Men stopped joking. They stopped planning past the next mission. That was the silent alarm. When soldiers stop thinking about tomorrow, they stop fighting smart. They become fatalists. And fatalism is contagious. Verity needed a solution, not a symbolic one, a functional one. Something that would give his people a tangible advantage, something they could believe in. Townsend's idea was risky, but risk was relative. What was riskier? Trying something unconventional or continuing to lose planes and pilots to a problem everyone acknowledged, but no one solved. Verity authorized a trial, not a public one, not a formal demonstration, just a quiet test. Townsend would take a Spitfire. He would attempt to reverse taxi, pivot, and short roll takeoff. No observers, no documentation. If it failed, they would bury the idea. If it succeeded, they would consider refining it. Townsend agreed. He selected a plane. He walked the field. He chose his line, and then he waited for the right conditions: calm wind, dry ground, and enough daylight to see the craters. The morning is cold. Frost coats the grass. The sun is a pale disk behind low clouds. Townsend walks the strip alone. He counts paces. He marks a mental map. He identifies the pivot point, a patch of compacted gravel 30 yards from the nearest crater. He will start there. Engine facing away from the operational runway, tail toward the takeoff path. It feels wrong. Every instinct, every hour of training tells him that planes face forward. But instinct is not infallible. Instinct is learned, and what is learned can be unlearned. He climbs into the cockpit. The Spitfire smells of oil and worn leather. The canopy is scratched. The instrument panel is familiar. Altimeter, airspeed indicator, fuel gauge. He does not need them yet. He starts the engine. The Merlin roars to life. The whole airframe shudders. He lets it warm. He adjusts the throttle. He checks the rudder pedals. Everything responds. Good. He releases the brake. He taps the left rudder. The plane begins to roll backwards slowly. The tail wheel chatters over uneven ground. He steers with gentle pressure. The rearward motion feels alien. He resists the urge to overcorrect. He counts seconds. 5, 10, 15. He reaches the mark. He brakes. The plane stops. He takes a breath. Now the pivot. He applies right rudder and asymmetric throttle. The nose swings. The plane rotates on its axis. 30 degrees 60-90. He straightens out. The nose now points down the operational strip. He can see the far end. Clear. No obstacles. He does not pause. He advances the throttle fully. The engine screams. The plane surges forward. The acceleration is immediate, sharper than usual. He is already moving when the wheels bite into the gravel. The tail lifts. The airspeed climbs 40 knots, 50, 60. He pulls back on the stick. The nose rises. The wheels leave the ground. He is airborne. Total time from pivot to wheels up, 8 seconds, half the usual roll. He banks gently and circles the field. Below, a single ground crew member watches. Townsend does not wave. He lands. He taxis back. He shuts down the engine and he walks directly to Verity's office. Verity listens to the report. He asks questions. Could it be replicated? Yes. Could it be taught? Probably. Could it be done under stress in the dark with bombs falling? That Townsend admits is unknown. Verity considers. He does not smile. He does not congratulate. He tells Townsend to do it again. Tomorrow and the day after. He wants consistency. He wants data. He wants proof that this is not a fluke. Townsend agrees. He runs the test 6 more times over the next week. Different weather, different aircraft, different starting positions. The results hold. The reverse taxi pivot and short roll takeoff reduces exposure time by an average of 4 to 6 seconds. It works, but word spreads. Other pilots hear about it. Some are curious, others are dismissive. One calls it a circus trick, another says it violates basic airmanship. A third asks what happens if the tail wheel catches on debris during the rearward roll. Townsend does not argue. He offers to demonstrate. 3 pilots accept. He walks them through the geometry. He shows them the marks on the ground. He explains the throttle control, the rudder timing, the weight distribution. Then he lets them try. The first pilot botches the pivot and has to start over. The second completes it but hesitates before advancing the throttle. The third executes it cleanly. When he lands, he says nothing, but his expression has changed. Doubt has become consideration. Verity calls a meeting. He gathers the senior flight officers. He presents the data. He does not frame it as revolutionary. He frames it as practical, a tool, an option, not a replacement for standard procedure, but an alternative when time is critical. He asks for volunteers to integrate it into their training rotations. 2 squadron leaders agree. Others remain silent. That is enough. Verity authorizes limited implementation. Pilots who want to learn the technique can. Those who do not are not forced. But the option is now official. And when the next raid comes, that option will matter. 3 weeks later, the Luftwaffe returns. It is early morning. The sun has not yet cleared the horizon. The air is still. A thin mist clings to the field. Ground crews are servicing a pair of Hurricanes near the eastern revetment. Pilots gather in the operations hut, drinking tea from chipped mugs. The mood is calm, routine. Then the sirens wail. Everyone freezes, not in panic, in recognition. They know the sound. They know what it means. The ground crews drop their tools and sprint for the shelters. The pilots abandon their tea and run for their aircraft. There is no time to think, only to move. Flight Officer James Harlow reaches his Spitfire first. He is 23, lean, quick hands. He has flown 32 combat missions. He has practiced Townsend's reverse takeoff technique 4 times. He did not believe in it at first, but he learned it anyway because survival is not about belief. It is about preparation. He vaults into the cockpit. He does not strap in fully. No time. He hits the starter. The engine coughs, catches, roars. He scans the sky. Nothing yet, but the sound is coming. A low, distant drone. Multiple engines. He knows that sound. Dorniers. Maybe Hank less. Close. He does not taxi forward. He taps the rudder and rolls backward. 15 yards, 20. He brakes. He pivots. The nose swings. Align. He shoves the throttle to full. The Spitfire leaps forward. The tail lifts instantly. He is at 50 knots in 3 seconds. 60, 70. He pulls back. The wheels leave the ground just as the first bombs detonate. The explosions ripple across the southern edge of the field. Geysers of earth and smoke. Shrapnel screams through the air. Harlow climbs hard. His hands are steady. His breathing is controlled. He does not look back. He concentrates on altitude, on spacing, on gaining clearance. 2 additional Spitfires follow. Both employ the reverse maneuver. Both are airborne within seconds of one another. A 4th pilot attempts a conventional takeoff from the far end of the strip. He makes it halfway along the roll when a bomb detonates 30 yards to his left. The blast flips the aircraft onto its side. The fuel tank ruptures. Flames erupt. Ground crews later discover the wreckage, twisted and unrecognizable. But Harlow and the others are already climbing past 2,000 feet. They form up, scanning for the bombers. The Dorniers are turning east, retreating toward France. Harlow does not pursue. His orders are to defend the airfield, not chase. He circles, vigilant. The raid lasts 4 minutes. When it concludes, 3 aircraft are destroyed on the ground, but 3 survive, 3 that would not have under the old procedure. Verity examines the incident report, noting the timestamps and the survivors. He does not need a statistician to interpret the results. The reverse takeoff succeeded. Not in a trial, not in theory, but in combat, under fire, when it truly counted. He summons Townsend to his office and informs him that the technique is no longer optional. It is now standard protocol for all pilots stationed at Manston. Townsend nods, without celebration. He understands this is not a triumph, merely a temporary reprieve. The raids will continue. The craters will multiply. But now there is at least a countermeasure, a method to fight against time itself. Word spreads to other stations, RAF Hawkinge, RAF Lim, RAF Biggin Hill. All confront similar challenges, all operate on short, damaged runways. Requests arrive. Can Townsend visit? Can he demonstrate the maneuver? Can he train their pilots? Verity approves. Townsend spends the next 2 months traveling between airfields. He instructs, refines, listens to feedback. Some pilots adapt quickly, others struggle with the timing of the pivot. A few reject it outright, calling it reckless. Townsend does not argue. He presents the data, shows survival rates, and leaves the decision to them. Most adopt it. By autumn, the reverse takeoff is practiced across 6 RAF stations in southeastern England. It is not miraculous. It does not halt the bombing, but it reduces casualties. It buys seconds, and in war, seconds are the currency of survival. Engineers begin marking optimal starting points on runways. Ground crews paint guidelines. Pilots rehearse the maneuver until it becomes second nature. It is no longer Townsend's personal innovation. It is doctrine, anonymous, absorbed, forgotten as an invention because it has become routine. That is how the best ideas endure, not through celebration, but through integration. The measurable impact is documented in after-action reports, casualty logs, and operational summaries. Between June and December 1943, RAF stations employing the reverse takeoff report a 14% reduction in aircraft lost to ground attacks. 14% may not sound dramatic, but it represents dozens of planes, hundreds of pilots, thousands of sorties that otherwise might have been lost. The maneuver does not remove the danger, it mitigates it. That is sufficient. Pilots interviewed post-war recall the method with a mixture of respect and casualness. It became simply something you did, like checking your six or conserving ammunition. One former squadron leader writes in his memoir that the reverse takeoff felt unnatural for exactly 3 attempts. After that, it felt indispensable. Another pilot, in a letter to his family, describes it as a clever geometric tactic that likely saved his life, though we can never be certain. That uncertainty is characteristic of combat. War does not permit controlled experiments. History cannot be rerun for comparison. One can only record outcomes and infer what might have been. Ground crews appreciated it: fewer wrecks to clear, fewer casualties to recover. One mechanic, in an oral history decades later, remembers the first time he saw a pilot execute the maneuver under fire. He thought the man had lost his mind, then witnessed the plane lift off while bombs still fell. He realized it was not madness, but precision. He said it altered his perception of fear. Fear, he concluded, is not the absence of danger, it is the absence of options. The reverse takeoff provided an option, and that made all the difference. The tactic also influenced post-war aviation. Military engineers studying short-field operations revisited Townsend's approach. They incorporated aspects into aircraft carrier launches and applied the logic to helicopter takeoffs, where initial speed and exposure time are equally critical. The principle, reducing time in the vulnerable phase through optimized pre-launch positioning, became foundational in tactical aviation and is taught in modified form at flight schools today. Few instructors know its origin. Fewer know Townsend's name, but the reasoning endures. Historians studying the air campaign over Britain often emphasize the major battles, radar networks, Spitfire versus Messerschmitt duels, and strategic bombing campaigns. These narratives are vital, but they overshadow incremental innovations, quiet problem-solving that cumulatively shifted outcomes. Townsend's reverse takeoff was one such innovation. It did not win the war, but it saved lives. Sustained survival, over time, is itself a form of victory. Peter Townsend remained in the Royal Air Force until 1956, serving in multiple theaters, earning additional decorations, and eventually attaining the rank of group captain. Yet he seldom spoke of the reverse takeoff. When asked, he described it as common sense, a solution to a specific problem. He deflected credit, emphasizing that others refined, tested, and implemented it successfully. That was his nature, uninterested in fame, devoted to function, problem-solving, and doing what needed to be done. After leaving service, he became a public figure for reasons unrelated to wartime service. Tabloids tracked his personal life, particularly his connections to the British royal family. He tolerated the attention, but those who truly knew him understood that his proudest accomplishments were technical moments when calculations proved correct, risks paid off, and logic under pressure saved lives. He died in 1995. Obituaries noted his service, his decorations, and later controversies, rarely mentioning the reverse takeoff. It had been absorbed into standard operations, uncredited. That would not have bothered him. He had not devised it for recognition, he had devised it because planes were burning and pilots were dying, and something had to be attempted. He tried it, and it worked. That was enough. The lesson of his story is not genius, it is attentiveness, noticing what others overlook, questioning whether convention is the only path. The Manston Airfield is now civilian property. Craters are filled, scars smoothed, but the principle remains. When rules fail to match reality, when doctrine becomes a cage, when survival demands innovation, someone must act, not with arrogance, not with defiance, but with curiosity, precision, and the quiet confidence that tested logic can reshape inevitability. Townsend did not wait for permission. He did not wait for disaster. He saw a problem and solved it, buying others the time they needed to survive. That is not a dramatic legacy, it is quiet, but in war, quiet acts often endure. They do not echo in speeches, they echo in the lives that continue, the missions flown, the families who welcome someone home. A 1944 photograph captures Townsend beside a Spitfire, hands in his pockets, squinting into the sun. He looks ordinary, just another pilot, another officer. But the aircraft behind him tells a different story, scorched, patched, battle-worn, still flying because someone decided that tradition was not absolute, that old ways were not the only ways, and sometimes survival depends not on brute strength, but on the courage to think backward, pivot, and launch into the unknown with nothing but math and nerve to guide you. That is the hidden brilliance, not the invention itself, but the audacity to try it and the humility to let it succeed without claiming glory.